Hello to my beautiful family of light, love, wisdom, courage, joy. Thank you so much for joining me here on my channel today. My name is Claudia. This is going to be the fourth installment of notes that I've taken on my life's journey to connecting with my soul self and what that looked like for me. What's in it for you is the possibility you will recognize some of the steps that you can identify within your own life experience and then act on that as well. So this is a storage. This is my life. The soul is calling, and it is chapter 4. The unknown requires trust, and there'll be a little break before we start the next little segment. So just a couple of seconds. So the unknown requires trust. Without a blueprint or pattern from which materials and measurements might be determined, building any structure is difficult and not likely to end up square and level as hoped, unless you're a very skilled craftsman at your trade. The same holds true for walking a spiritually guided path. Most of the time, the path reveals itself one piece at a time, giving you time to integrate and think about it. The instructions I had for starting a new life were somewhere within, and I wondered about accessing them. The timing and all the rest of the multitude of questions that a life change requires. What I recalled stayed on the fringes of my mind daily, resulting in a back and forth argument of logic versus fleeting intuition and remembrance. Continually challenged by doubt that a plan existed, all I could do was trust in what I experienced, and stop the questions, employing a direction correction. Or course correction is what I like to call it. Proceeding without a physical check sheet to post over my desk was an exercise in letting go of control, leaving only trust. Trust in what? Trust what had happened was real. For some reason I didn't understand. I did trust, or felt like I did. I believed that I would know when an item was completed and what the next project to tackle would be. I trusted in the timing and that I would know what I needed to know when I needed to know it. What I was about to do required letting go of structure in order to go with the flow, something I was not practiced in. Yet whenever doubt surfaced, and it did, a calm presence was projected into my mind and body, filling me with a reassurance that I was on track. Midweek following our return from Bend, my Tai Chi instructor called to change the location of a planned outdoor session she was holding. About to begin home repair and clean-out projects, I had to tell her I wouldn't be able to make it. Interestingly, before the call, I'd been wondering where to begin and hadn't made a decision. Nothing from the list seemed foremost. Hanging up, very aware of my first project, I experienced satisfaction in the realization that I would know something about that call. That is how time outside of work and my son's activities was spent through the end of winter and on into spring and summer. A project would come to mind, divine inspiration as I now called it, would start a process of trying to figure out how I was going to manage it, unskilled as I am in home repairs. Having grown up in a house of 7 men, 6 brothers and my dad, what I recall was that my dad was always working outside the home. Including him, there were 10 mouths to feed, and Mom was the fixer and creative genius behind most home projects. I think we all helped in various ways as a gopher or extra hand, And because I was the eldest daughter, I was always watching the 4 younger kids. I had limited knowledge of what wielding a hammer or turning a screw meant. And as an adult with a home of my own, I was the fix-it gal for minor things. While a memory comes to mind that while married on a Sunday afternoon, my son came barreling around the corner outside yelling, "Mom, Mom, Dad poked a hole in the water pipe and we can't stop it." That is how I gratefully became familiar with our local hometown hardware store. The men there helped me learn many how-tos of home repairs. I'd tell them what was wrong, and with patience of saints, they questioned until they clearly understood the problem and the need and set me in the right direction. Especially motivated, progress into June had everything shipshape, and I felt I was on schedule. Nathan, my son, was away on a 2-week hiking and fishing vacation with 2 uncles and a cousin his age, getting the badly needed break from his mom and the stresses he felt from the divorce. Although I knew the time was coming when he would find out that we would be moving, I didn't tell him. Mid-July. I had a strong feeling about what I was doing and where I was headed, but nervous about the influx of questions and backlash that would eventually flow. I still hadn't told him. But a sign showing our house for sale was set on the lawn. Naturally, everyone wanted to know my intentions. Nathan's dad mentioned that he thought we could live close to each other, making sharing parenting responsibilities easier, to which I kept silent. My son and I began the laborious task of packing, sorting through the things that would be recycled and the items I would hang on to. My unspoken intention was that I would bring him along with me with the majority of his bedroom furnishings, belongings, and the things he wanted to keep. I wanted familiar items around to help him ease into the changes. Other than my bed, all the furnishings were hand-me-downs, old and worn, and were given away to interested family and to thrift stores. My mother's piano, now mine, I gave to my brother J.P., who had 2 daughters. He was so thrilled he cried, not only at the gesture, because it was a joyful representation of the mother of our youth. His desire for his daughters to have lessons was extremely satisfying to me, and I was so grateful that the piano would stay in the family, especially with my brother, whom I knew would care for it well. The house sold within 3 weeks, leaving just a month to finalize the move. It was now time to tell my husband, family, and friends of the plans to head to Wyoming. Interesting, some of my siblings thought I was taking after our mother, who had lived there following her divorce to Dad, a kind of wanderlust sort of thing, I thought. Having worked for a data management group, it had been my job to be a critical thinker. When dealing with the divine, a rational mind can't find the sense anywhere around, near, or within an "I don't know why" statement. Keeping to myself that I didn't actually know, and I just simply agreed with my family that Mom, who had lived in Wyoming, must have been the influence propelling the curiosity what lay ahead there. Unless one is speaking with an intuitive or other spiritually oriented being, it's nearly impossible to justify, quantify, or reason the impulses that are part of one's connection to the divine. It's a hidden part of my being. It was a hidden part of their beingness, my beingness, the soul self in expression. I had no explanation for the unexplainable. The only motive, our goal, became tapping into and sticking with, trusting where the unknown takes us. As yet, I didn't have a clear understanding of the agreement my soul had participated in writing, likely long before the incarnation. I had a directive from myself that my angelic helpers were helping me to remember, and no amount of explaining was going to make that all right for anyone other than me. When asked, I simply said that I didn't know or that I had a feeling. When I told my ex-husband that I would be moving, he became very excited, suggesting there was an apartment next door to his, and wouldn't that make sharing custody that much easier? I waited until the next day to tell him that Nathan and I would be moving the 1st of September to Wyoming. That left about 3 weeks left to prepare for our departure. After listening to my plans for moving, my ex had said nothing, and I assumed he was taking it in for processing. The following Friday evening, when I got home from work, Nathan met me before I could get through the door with a serious look on his face, holding a small stack of papers for me. He told me a man had come to the door and told me to give this to you. Our 12-year-old son had been served court-ordered documents meant for me. I was being told I couldn't take our son out of the state. Although typically thoroughly exhausted from the long hours expended each day, I was now wide awake and internally fuming. Livid doesn't begin to describe the anger at the way in which the papers had been served. Looking back now, I realize I should have been prepared for the worst. Naturally, his dad would be shocked and angry. All I could think of was the promise of change and adventure before us, the excitement that generated. All he could think about was that I was taking his son away from him. Of course, his dad would be shocked and angry. In hindsight, I did know it would be this way, which is why I hadn't given him much time to process it. But as was typical prior to this, and one cause of the divorce, there hadn't been an interest in his son prior to this, and he didn't bother to communicate with me his needs or desires ever, and certainly not now. Taking Nathan down to the park on Lake Washington for our supper, I scarcely enjoyed our favorite fish and chips. Afterward, needing to walk, we bought some bread to feed the geese, which were abundant and ravenous. Back at home, it was his bedtime. Taking his bath and tucking him in and talking and reading a bit of a story, my sweet boy, all that I could do was think of the amount of stress he'd been under since the divorce. Having to handle such things alone, I watched him take on the man-of-the-house role as best as a youngster could. He'd been very brave and stronger than any child should have to be. I spent that weekend pacing, worrying, and wondering what I needed to do. It had thrown me totally out of my happy place. His dad came and got him for a game on Wednesday and said he wanted to keep him for a few days. Thinking that to be more normal behavior, I was pleased at his wanting to spend more time with him and easily agreed. When he didn't return him a few days later, I called to see what the plan was. His dad said he wasn't planning on returning him until we could come to an agreement. That Friday night, I paced and cried, had a horrible sinking feeling that I'd never see my son again. Friday night and Saturday were spent frozen with fear, doubts creeping in, and sorrow, deep sorrow. Having been up for 24 hours, almost more than, unable to eat, sleep, or think clearly, I turned to God. What was I supposed to do? Wasn't my son to come with me? Around 1 a.m., it was now Sunday, having no strength or capacity for reason left, I sat in my favorite chair, mentally and physically, emotionally exhausted. Looking out the picture window at the street lamps below, at the street lamp shadows on the trees and yard, I gave it over to God, saying simply, I don't know what to do. Suddenly, out of my body, I was transforming into an eagle, a mama eagle. I flew over the house, clearly seeing the life I'd created for myself, our family, and my son, the past 2 years, and for a time as a family. I flew around the neighborhood, seeing each one of the friends and neighbors who had participated in helping to raise my latchkey child. I could see those that had provided on occasion cookies and milk after school, their own child to play with in a safe place before I returned home from work. Those that had taken him to or picked him up from band practice, a sports event, or school along with their own child. The gratitude grew within me, and I realized how little I had appreciated these helping hands. Experiencing all the thoughtfulness extended to my son was humbling. Had I been selfish, I wondered? But as quickly as a potential negative thought crept in, it was replaced by a positive one that was inspired from God, and I was shown that that is how cooperation looks. When we humans are working together without motive, only with love. It was clearly an aha moment, to be sure. The lucid dream vision continued as as an eagle, I began to make wider circles around the neighborhood, the school, and the town, flying over to where he was staying with his dad. I began to circle there, waking his dad, who eagerly also became an eagle. We flew together, dancing a perfectly orchestrated piece in unison on the wind. My mind was opening to and remembering the wonderful parts of the life we'd created together. It included the expansion of family and friends. We flew together as a couple, and I saw and felt the reasons we had been together, each of us exploring and growing from and through our individual, then joint husband and wife, and then father-mother experiences. We were evolving spiritually, gaining expanded awareness of who we thought we were and ultimately of who we truly are. Both of us, not just me. Another aha moment in recognition for all of us, each and every human, individually as children of God, not a select few, but all. There was no exclusion to this revelation, none. Then I flew down and retrieved our little eaglet from his sleep. Together we flew, remembering the time we had shared together as a family unit, nearly 13 years. We visited the places we'd lived, and I experienced all of the accompanying feelings of joy and hopefulness, disappointment and sadness. As we flew to the present, I felt and saw myself begin gently withdrawing back from them. Becoming the observer, I watched the two, father and son, flying together. They dipped and swirled, creating their own dance as they flew in unison, and at times, each flying solo, doing their own thing. Before long, I was sitting on a branch in a far distant tree, simply watching the two of them being and creating together. From this perch, the realization came into my whole being that it was their turn. I was shown that it was time for me to allow them their chance at creating their new life. Regardless of any previous feelings I had harbored about that subject, I was filled with powerful gratitude for the gift I'd been giving of sharing life with these two remarkable humans. With complete clarity, it was time to leave my son with his dad. I understood that it was not only okay, but was important, imperative, in fact, necessary that the two of them have their time together without my influence, that their growth and love would come through each other as they faced their unknown. I was shown also clearly understanding that I would be leaving my son with his dad and that I would be going alone into the next chapter of my life. All I know is that the realization that this was good, that it was as it should be, caused my body and mind to finally rest and be at peace. I came back into my body, resting in the knowledge that the two would be fine and that they were in the same loving hands that all of us are. I've never been so certain God had our backs and that we were all held in profound love. I finally slept soundly. Sunday morning, I woke early, refreshed, and clear-headed. I cleaned up, then called my ex, to see if we could meet for coffee, which he agreed to. I inquired about Nathan, whom I was assured was fine, and went on to tell him that I would be moving to Wyoming and leaving our son with him. Thank you for listening to this aspect in chapter of my life. I think we've all had difficult things we've had to struggle with. Challenge is a part of human design and our blueprint, which I'm being shown in this chapter I just read quite clearly, is that this is a time for the two of them. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, as well as gaining some perspective of your own and the challenges you've been through and how you've been helped through those. I appreciate all of your comments and you liking and subscribing. Subscribing helps me to expand who gets to find out maybe a different perspective on something they've gone through or pointed out or remind, because everything buried or nothing buried is dead emotionally. Things that are buried are still alive and within us, need our attention. Thank you again so much for being here. I appreciate your listening, and if you want to know more about me, it's down below. I love you profoundly this much. See you in the next video.